So hi everybody, and welcome to another Innovation Cafe session. And today our guest is Emily. Okay, I will invite Emily to introduce herself. And I think she's going to talk about, not about methods, not about tools, but about mindsets. And I'm really curious because every time I interview someone talking about mindsets, I start thinking, okay, but in real life, how can we change the mindset? How can we make the mindset something tangible? And not just another inspirational type of talk or conversation. But I think Emily is going to change the way I think about mindset talks and conversations, right, Emily? But first, a few words about you, and then the floor is yours, 20 minutes, and then Q&A. And thank you all for joining today.
Great, thanks, Hugo. So to start off with, we are in the Innovation Cafe. As I mentioned, it's my first time. I'm very keen to make friends, so I'm buying the drinks. And I'd quite like to know, what does everybody want? So if you want to go ahead, open the chat and just post in there, you know, what am I getting from you for you? And because it's a hypothetical cafe, I guess you can have anything you want. It doesn't have to be a coffee. But yeah, it would be good to know, what am I getting you from the cafe? I myself, very partial to a latte. I'm not a coffee snob. I don't pretend to know about all the different varieties. So Starbucks latte is all good. Hugo's having a few pints. Yeah, absolutely. Why not if it's a fictional cafe? Chai latte, nice. Yeah, that's a good choice, Chris. Anyone else? Any other favorites in the house for what you usually get when you go to a cafe? A G&T. Well, that's just made my bill a lot cheaper, Jenny, that you've already got one. So that's great to see. Hot chocolate, yeah, nice. I'm with you on that one. There's nothing better than a hot chocolate, even if it's 28 degrees like it is here in the UK right now. Great, so it's lovely to meet you all, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion. Today, I'm going to be talking about meaningful mindsets for innovation. And to answer that, I'm going to look at two key questions. The first one, what does that even mean? Hugo, your introduction sort of picked out something that is really central to this topic, which is that a lot of the time mindsets don't really seem to mean anything. So what does it mean to have a meaningful mindset? And secondly, what should we actually do about it? So to introduce myself, who am I? I am an innovation trainer, a facilitator, and a practitioner. My current role is heading up training at 90. Basically what that means is I train people in innovation and innovation mindsets. I help people to be practitioners and to be good facilitators as well. So if you want to connect after this, you're absolutely welcome to. I will post my Zoom link, my LinkedIn link in the chat. And yeah, if you want to connect, then absolutely do so. It'd be great to catch up about the stuff that we talk about today. And just before we get started as well, just a little bit about where I come from. So I work for 90, as I mentioned. 90 is an innovation consultancy. We specialize in the insurance sector, and we do that across the globe. The other important thing to notice about us is the reason we're called 90. Actually, we're called 90 because we're a social enterprise. So we give away 90% of our distributable profits for charity. That is the reason behind being there and doing what we do. So time to kick off in earnest, and I'll start with the first question, which is all about what is a meaningful mindset? And I'm going to answer that first question by busting some mindset myths. The first myth that I have here is all about this idea that a mindset is something you either have or you don't. And I come across this all the time in my job. People saying things like, I'm not a creative person, or our compliance team is really risk averse. And this is particularly true for an industry like insurance. There are a lot of assumptions and perceptions that go around about the type of people that work in different industries. And I think that's something that we have to be really mindful of when we think about mindsets. The second myth, to change mindsets, you have to change people. You have to change their DNA fundamentally. You have to make them into someone else who looks like the sort of person that you want to have on board. And essentially what this means is that when people have this point of view, there's a whole bunch of people that they just write off. You know, this person is never going to have the innovative mindset I'm looking for, so I won't really bother to consult them about this innovation project. And if I need to involve them, I'll involve them as late as possible, so that I don't have to deal with their mindset as much as I can. And the third myth, and this is very much tied to the top two, is that mindsets are these nebulous theoretical concepts. They float around in the air. They don't really mean anything, but when someone has it, you know they have it. I think creative people are the biggest example of this. When we think of creative people, we think of that sort of lone wolf meditating on a mountain or writing abstract poetry or whatever it might be. And when people don't fit that mold, we assume that they don't possess that mindset. So in my view, this way of thinking about mindsets is not constructive. We have to have a different way of thinking about mindsets that helps us to unlock them. And as innovators, that is our responsibility, to unlock those mindsets in other people. So instead, here is what I would suggest. The first point is that mindsets are accessible to everyone. It's not the case that some people have a mindset and others do not. And as I said, it's our responsibility to put people in that mindset for a month, a week, or even for a 1-hour workshop. We have the power to do that. That's part of the real joy of facilitation, is being able to take someone out of a place where they were and bring them into a new place, even if it's just for a really small period of time. That's what makes innovation fun, right? We can bring people together and get them to act differently for a period. Secondly, you don't need people to adopt an innovative mindset all of the time. So I hear a lot of people saying, you know, I wish we could just change our people and they were already innovative. But actually, if you think about how businesses work, this fundamentally doesn't make sense. There's a really nice innovation book that I like called Beyond the Idea. And in that book, they talk about the fact that innovation is actually fundamentally opposed to business as usual. Imagine, for example, if all the people in the compliance team in an organization start being creative with the rules and taking risks all the time. You know, we're not going to have a company left if people behave like that. So we need to get rid of this perception that we need to fundamentally change people and make them be one way all of the time. And finally, unlike this first perception that mindsets are nebulous and they're just theoretical and they don't really mean anything, I actually believe that mindsets are practical. And what this essentially means is, if you tell someone be creative or be curious, they're really going to struggle to implement that. Either they're going to resort to stereotypes of what they think that means, or they're going to not be able to achieve it at all and they're going to give up. They're going to think I'm not that person that you want me to be. So what we need to do is think about tools and techniques that we can use to unlock that in people. So this moves me nicely onto my next question of what should we do about it? But before I ask that, I know there are a lot of mindsets that go around in terms of innovation. So again, on the chat, I'd love to know what you think the key mindsets for innovation are. I have some ideas in my mind as well. I'm only going to cover 2 today, so it'd be good to air the others and get them out in the open before I focus in on just 2. This will be really interesting for me because, as I mentioned, a lot of my work is for the insurance industry. So it is interesting to see if it differs amongst industries. Chris says curiosity. Great, I'm going to talk about curiosity actually. That's the first one I'm going to discuss. Embracing challenges. Yeah, I like that. Anybody else? Any thoughts on mindsets for innovation? Openness, Chris, that's really nice. I think people struggle with openness, right? And that's not just within organizations, it's outside as well. A lot of companies very insular. Being comfortable with the unknown, yeah, that's really nice. Exploring, experimentation, absolutely. Putting yourselves in other shoes, Jenny, that's a fantastic one. And we often find that with companies that say they're customer-centric, they often still lack that ability to put themselves in the customer's shoes. So is that real customer centricity? Empathy, courage. Yeah, these are all fantastic. Yeah, I agree with all of these. I think they're key mindsets for innovation. I'm going to talk about two today, curiosity and creativity. They're my favorite two. And I also want to use these as examples of how mindsets are going to be practical. So what I'm going to do is talk about two specific techniques that I use to unlock these mindsets in people during training. So let's talk about our first one, curiosity. This owl, I mean, I guess it's curious. I found it on the internet and I thought it was really cute, so I thought I would put it in the presentation. But what we're actually going to talk about is not owls, but pairs, thinking pairs to be precise, which is a really nice activity, which is great for unlocking curiosity. And sometimes when I do sessions, I run this activity with people. You'll probably be very glad in a minute that we're not doing it today. Everybody dreads it, but they get a lot from doing the activity anyway. So all that thinking pairs comes down to is the concept of active listening. And this technique was coined by Nancy Klein. She wrote an influential book called Time to Think, Listening to Ignite the Human Mind. And basically what thinking pairs consists of is getting two people together to have a conversation in a very strange and unusual way. So in this conversation, one person asks the other a question, and then the person who asked the question must sit in silence for 3 minutes while the other person answers. This is really interesting because often when we have conversations with people, whether we realize it or not, we interrupt all the time. And if you're anything like me, I'm as bad as this at anyone. You're thinking about what you want to say next, even while that person is talking. And then it comes round to your turn to speak and you think, wow, what did they even say? I'm not really sure that I grasped the full extent of what they were talking about. So thinking pairs is really good from this point of view. But it's also good from the point of view that interrupting is a violent act. Very melodramatic. These are Nancy Klein's words, not mine. But essentially what she means by this is that when we interrupt people, we cut them off. And this is very important from an innovation perspective because, especially in the earlier stages, we really need to get as much information as we can, particularly with customers. If we go into a room with a customer, we have a conversation with them, we're trying to find out some thoughts, some feedback, some insights for our products. It's actually in our interest to embrace the silence and let that customer reach the full extent of what they want to say. If we don't do that, we miss out on opportunities because it's only once we start talking that we start to find our train of thought. When you have conversations with people, you start talking almost immediately after the other person has stopped. And what this means is that when we have conversations and when we do anything, actually, we rarely reach the full extent of what we want to say. So something like thinking pairs is a really useful way to think about curiosity. It helps people to take that step back and think, what does it actually mean to be curious in this scenario? It's not just me asking loads and loads of questions of this person. It's actually me taking that step back and being able to listen actively and without judgment. So to summarize then, the basic premise of how this works as a curiosity tool is that to be interrupted is not good. Nobody likes it. To get lucky and not be interrupted is better. But to know you will not be interrupted allows you to truly think for yourself. So when we talk about curiosity as a mindset, what we're talking about is giving people tools and techniques to practically put people into this space. And by the way, I'm a big fan of using this in other ways as well. It doesn't just have to be with customers. One really good concept that Klein came up with is the round. We use this all the time in my workplace. Essentially, what it consists of is the person leading the meeting asks the question. Everyone else in the room is set the expectation that they'll be allowed to talk for a certain period of time answering that question before anyone else is allowed to interrupt or to offer their point of view. And this enables us to go around the whole room before we start discussing. What that means is that the people who are often cut off, the introverted people, the people who feel less safe to speak up, always get that opportunity. And the other people in the room are more actively listening to what all their colleagues have to say. So I think for curiosity, this is a good example of how we can make the mindset meaningful and we can interpret it in a practical way. The next mindset I said I would talk about was creativity. Creativity is the biggest one for me. I find that people all the time say they're not curious and not creative, sorry. And when it comes to that question or that point of view, that's something I said about myself for a very long period of time. I've had to train myself to tell people that I am a creative person. I do fundamentally believe it now, but I guess when you grow up, you kind of taught there are different people in the world. There are people who are creative and go off and be rock stars and artists or whatever it is. And then there's other people who do different sort of jobs. Actually, creativity is not mutually exclusive and everybody is creative. So what's interesting about creativity is that scientifically, there is such a thing as a creative person. People who are creative have more connections between the left-hand side of their brain and the right-hand side of their brain. But actually, when you look into it and you investigate the science of creativity, what you find is that these connections are formed by neuroplasticity. So basically, the more you practice being creative, the more you become creative. So although scientifically there is such a thing as being a creative person, whether you are that person or not is down to you. It's a skill that you can cultivate just like anything else. And I think this is very important when we think about this mindset in particular and making it something that's accessible to everyone. I fundamentally believe that creativity is very intimidating to most people. It sounds like fun, but actually it really fills people with fear. You're going to make me get up and sing and dance and draw on a piece of paper, and that's terrifying to me because I don't often do that and maybe I'll be embarrassed. So I think, again, with this particular mindset, we need to make it practical and we need to take the fear out of it so that it's accessible to everyone. So I'm going to run through one technique that I particularly like, and it's called the Scamper Technique. The reason that I like this technique is that it really takes away the intimidation of being creative, because the whole technique is premised on the fact that there is no such thing as a new idea. We shouldn't even be thinking about new ideas because fundamentally there's no such thing. There's only building on what has already been done. So the idea behind it is that you get people together and you use this mnemonic as a stimulus to help people to be creative. And this is great because if you get people in a room and ask them to be creative, they're immediately going to be worried about doing that. If you get them in a room and you help them to travel down a tool or a technique, it's automatically more accessible. So I'm just going to run through what the mnemonic means. I'll give some examples. If you think of any other examples, please go ahead and post them in the chat as we go along. So the S in Scamper stands for substitute. Essentially what that means is taking part of an existing product or service and seeing if you can exchange it for something else. So kind of like what McDonald's did with the self-service screens. They thought, what if we take all the people who are taking all of these orders and actually we just replace them with machines, and then we'll have more people able to do more of the cooking, we'll get the food out faster and we'll make more money. Next we have combine. When I think about combine, I always think of my phone. When I was growing up, I had my phone, I had my iPod, and I had my camera. And I had to carry all three of them around with me to do all three of those activities in one day. Now I have them all in my phone, and every time Apple releases a new iPhone, all they do is include new features on top of the ones that they've already combined into this one device. So now you can have a heart rate monitor or a blood oxygen level or whatever it is, you know, even if it's pointless. They add it into the phone, they retail it as a new innovation, and everybody goes out and buys it. After that, we have adapt. So taking an idea that worked to solve one problem and using it to solve a different problem. Netflix did this really well. It's one of those commonly cited innovation facts that Netflix was called Netflix before they actually did streaming. They were still dropping DVDs through people's doors and they were called Netflix because they knew about how to adapt. After that, we have modify. So this is taking something that already exists and making it much bigger or making it much smaller. There's some good insurance examples out there of this, where people took contents insurance and thought, no one wants to insure everything in their home. So what if we gave them insurance where they could insure just those 1 or 2 items that are truly valuable to them? After that, we have put in another use. So taking something that is out there that's been used for something and changing it and using it for something else entirely. Again, this is an insurance example, but telematics is a good example of this. It was originally a field of computing, and then they thought, you know, what if we take this and we apply it to car insurance? Can we make people's insurance cheaper? Can we learn more about them? And so on and so forth. After that, we have eliminate. Again, this is a pretty obvious one. Can you take parts of a process and remove it completely? I'm totally obsessed by this new concept of stitch fix. I don't know, I guess depending on the country, you might have it or you might not. I haven't used it, but I think the concept is really clever. It's this idea that you no longer have to shop for or try on clothes. You just submit what sort of clothes you like to this website, and they will send you clothes in the post that match your personality and your size and your style preferences. No more shopping. You just have it there for you. And finally, we have reverse. So taking something the way that it is and completely turning it on its head and see if it works the other way around. I've yet to see a really good innovation in this space. So if anybody identifies those, then yeah, please let me know. It would be great to have a good example of that one. So this brings me to the close of what I wanted to talk about. But to summarize, we have over here on the right the new charter for making mindsets meaningful. I didn't want to speak for a really long time. I just wanted to give some food for thought on what this meant and how it would be done. So just to reiterate key messages. Firstly, mindsets are accessible to everyone. If you see someone or you know someone and they say, I'm not creative, I'm not curious, I'm not this, I'm not that, correct them. Do it for yourself as well. If you've never considered yourself to be a creative person, challenge yourself to believe that that is true. Everybody is creative. Secondly, remember that you don't need people to adopt a mindset all of the time. And it's really easy to do this in an innovation session. You can bring people in and you can immediately make it totally different to any experience they've ever had before and help them to be in that mindset for that period of time. Even doing something as simple as telling people you're in this space, you're allowed to be creative, really works for people. It makes a difference. And finally, remember that mindsets are practical. I hope you benefited from seeing the tools that I shared today. There's so many of them out there. And I really hope that we can all use this to, you know, take our mindsets forward and help with other people. So that is it from me, but I will stick around and see if anyone has any questions or any discussions, any challenges that you want to offer me.
Thanks, Emily. First of all, for your presentation. Okay, thank you for being here today. And now it's time for Q&A. So feel free to unmute, turn on the camera, say thank you to Emily, and ask any question. The first one is always the hardest one. So, Chris, are you ready to ask a question? Because you have just unmuted yourself.
Yeah, it's more, it's not really a question, but thank you very much, Emily. I love curiosity, especially. It's more question of how do I raise curiosity in the team and what can we do? So I also try to give inputs to completely new areas of topics. Like, hey, this is an interesting documentary or interesting video on YouTube or whatever, and share this and just or ask random questions just to start kind of like a discussion about stuff like what do you do, what do you want to learn next in your, well, that nothing to do with jobs, and you're saying learn like, oh, somebody wants to learn to surf, somebody wants to learn another language. And so yeah, this is something I do in my team, or I would like to do more in my team to kind of get them to become more curious and look out what's out there and include it in what we're doing.
Yeah, that's really nice. Thanks for sharing. It sounds like a good place to be in, a nice environment. You know, something I always like to do is to write agenda items as questions. I think sometimes people turn up to meetings and they're like, this is a great opportunity for me to have a rest and sort of sit back, listen to this person who created this agenda with full stops at the end, which means they know what they're talking about and they're going to be the guiding light on this topic. So writing agenda items as questions can really help. People turn up, they know they have to be curious and proactive, and it helps them to be accountable in that way. Cool. Any other questions, comments? And thanks, by the way, for the examples in the chat. That's nice for the Scamper Technique. Some new.
Yeah, I have a question. So imagine a public body or public administration, governments, or even imagine insurance or traditional banking. How do we embrace or even industrialize creativity across the board? So large organization, old and clunky. Creativity is like, what? Sorry, I don't want that. How do we do that? Because many times what we see is, okay, there's a group of creative people. There's always a crazy guy, the entrepreneur. Okay, but how do we change the organization to embrace creativity as part of the DNA?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm afraid I don't know if I can give you the full answer. I mean, that is a huge topic to tackle. But I think we can start with small things, right? So I do a lot of training for people to help them become facilitators. And when I train them to be facilitators, I tell them, like, you don't need to wait for an innovation workshop to use these tools. You can start by using these tools in your everyday meetings to leverage a new way of working and a new style of doing things. And I think that's really important. A lot of organizations just lack that facilitator person. I'm always going to say that because I am a facilitator and I really enjoy it, but I think it makes a massive difference to the way that people operate and feeling like those things are okay. But it also just comes down to psychological safety. There's not enough psychological safety in the workplace. I think a lot of the resistance to creativity comes from people thinking that it's not socially acceptable to be creative and to be that kind of person. Laura, you have a question in the chat. Is it possible to over-listen? Yeah, that's a great question. I really like that. Let me say for starters, thinking pairs is a time-boxed activity for sure. I mean, it's just too unbearable to do it for more than 3 minutes. If you have this predilection like I do to maybe talk too much and listen too little, try your own discomfort by testing it out on a friend or family member. Sometimes I ring people and I don't tell them that I'm doing this, but I like to time myself and see how long I can go without interrupting them and just see what they talk to me about. But yeah, absolutely. There comes a natural point where you know that you need to step in. I think with customers in particular, there is a real tendency to lead and to want to step in, especially when you're passionate about something. I don't know if you're familiar with the principles of the mum test, but I always find that super useful in any sort of innovation activity. And that will help you to know when to step in and to redirect the conversation. But yeah, if you're using this technique, especially with a customer, you know, set expectations. Otherwise, they might think you're just really weird. Make it clear to them, this conversation is all about me, finding out what you think. It's not for me to impose my views on you, and I really want to listen to you. Thanks, Hugo, for sharing the website. It's a great tool, right? So useful. Yeah, I love it. Jenny, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I have kind of the opposite situation to Hugo in that I work a lot with innovators who are technical innovators. And so they've already done a lot of innovating in coming up with a product that they want to take to market. My challenge is getting them to change their mindsets and innovating in terms of from a customer perspective. Doesn't always happen. So that's why my earlier comment about getting them to stand in other people's shoes, because that's a really difficult shift, and could be challenging the work that they've already done. There may be things, they may be adding features that are not really relevant to the customers that they're trying to sell to. It might not be a good fit, and they might need to revisit work. So I just wonder if you've got any observations or advice there.
Yeah, firstly, this is very relatable. We have a saying that we use at 90, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Much easier said than done though, right? People get very passionate about their ideas, especially when they've worked on it for a period of time, and no one really wants to be told that their idea isn't good or that they can't deliver it in the way that they want to deliver it. But the truth of the matter is that if we don't talk to customers and learn from them, we might design something that nobody wants. There's so many examples of those out there on the market. So it's one of those things where it's all just about reinforcing you're falling in love with the problem and not with the solution. And actually customer insights can only ever add, because if you think about it, you know, to invest time and money into an idea that you launch to the market and then it fails and you've lost all of your investment, you know, it's better to know that earlier rather than later. So it's kind of about those messages, reinforcing them and encouraging people to really become obsessed by the problem they're solving rather than the solution.
Yeah, the number of clients I work with who say, I wish I'd done this like 2 years ago before I'd kicked off.
Yeah,
it's significant.
yeah, it is. And it's hard to manage people's emotions as well, right?
It is. And the definition of the problem, though, sometimes it's about what they think the problem is. These people should do this, they should need this. Doesn't necessarily mean their perception is of that. So getting them to put themselves in the other person's shoes, it's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you often find is that people will come to you with an idea and they'll say, customers want this, therefore we've created this. And if you ask, you know, how many customers did you speak to, or where did you find your insights? They're like, oh, I haven't spoken to anyone. But this is what customers want. I promise this is what they want. But I haven't spoken to anyone yet. So yeah, you're totally right. It is a real problem. Maybe down to the fact that we're all human beings, right? And we think that we understand everyone else and everyone else is just like us. They're not. Everybody is different. And we have to ask them what they want to an extent to create something that's needed.
And do you think that organizations are now more ready to embrace creativity in innovation, or did the pandemic change the overall status quo, or are we going back to where we were before March 2020? What do you think?
That's a really good question, because I think there was a lot of talk about people being separate from each other and the implications that has for them. And I've heard people say from both sides, you know, I know some people who've said, actually working from home, the pandemic, it's forced me to think differently about how I interact with people, and it's given me more reflective time to come up with more ideas. And then there are other people, and I put myself in this bucket, who love talking to people and find that bouncing ideas off others is a good way to be really creative. So I think it's a mixture. But what I would say is that there is a lot of evidence out there about how many people are looking to change roles now. The pandemic has made people think differently about work and what work means and what it is, and do I really want to turn up and do this job every day? And for that reason, I feel like companies need to be thinking about this sort of thing. You know, mindsets are really key to making people feel welcome and included. And if we don't think about that and take account of it, we won't be able to attract the best talent and retain the best talent. So it is important to think about.
There's a challenge that I came across quite a few times. I'd like to share, and maybe you have a good idea on this. So imagine we identified a problem and we collected a bunch of ideas, good ones, not so good ones, but we don't know yet because we didn't test. And now we have let's say a team, interdisciplinary or cross-functional team. You have a sales guy, you have someone from purchasing, someone from quality, so really different mindsets in there, like say 6 or 8 people. And now these group of people, with the help of a coach or facilitator or innovation manager, they should now test and validate and select 1 or 2 ideas to go through this assumption-based testing cycle. How to go about it? I mean, what is the most friendly, efficient, effective way of doing this? And imagine they can't work full time in this team, right? They come together once in a while, like every week or so, for 1 or 2 hours. Of course, that goes on top of their daily work. And now they have to do something. Huh? So
yeah,
what would it be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's another book that I really like, and you can get it actually on the internet as a PDF. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not, but anyway, it is out there as a PDF. It's very short. It's called Pretotype It. I'll try and find it in the chat and put it in the chat at some point. But it's all about these super simple experiments you can do to test assumptions, and I think having this mindset is very helpful. So we tell people to be experimental, but again, as with most mindsets, we don't tell them what that means. People think about experiments, they think about science labs with, bubbling cauldrons and all of this high-tech stuff that they should be doing. Actually, it can be really, really simple how to test an idea and to start challenging those assumptions. So I guess my guidance would be, think about the simple first step that you can take and just build from there and keep going, gather that momentum and use that to validate or disprove your assumptions. I hope that helps.
Yeah, for my understanding, would you then, how would then the decision be taken in the team? Because you don't have a team leader in such a group, huh? So they're all equal, of course. So how?
Yeah, well, it's all about being scientific. So if you're running experiments, you need to be sure how you're going to know if that experiment is a success or not, and establish that criteria beforehand.
Right. So you have a sort of, matrix or scorecard or something then in the end, or table where you collect.
Yeah, I think one problem with innovation, one issue that often gets fallen into, and Jenny, I mean, we were talking about this earlier, is that people just love their own ideas. And when people love their own ideas, they will turn a blind eye to everything that's wrong with it. This can be overcome. Don't worry about that. We'll just shove this bit in the cupboard and it won't matter. So we need to make sure when we test ideas, we have established criteria everyone agrees on first, so that we don't go out and just say, oh, okay, mixed reviews, but let's just carry on anyway and see where this one goes.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so we still have time for one more question. Sophia, you are unmuted. Do you want to crack on?
Yes, so on the topic of measuring the first experiments, how can we define the numbers, the initial ones? We are going to the market, like we know not much about it. We are running an experiment and we will define we are successful if. How do you have any tips on these numbers? Yeah.
So first off, when you're thinking about numbers, to me, this is like maybe even later stage. So the initial experiments are maybe even more fundamental than that. So if we think about assumptions, I mean, the first assumption that we have is that customers are actually going to want to use our product or service or whatever it is. To get that sort of feedback, we don't immediately need to go launch it to the market and then see how many people buy it. We can start off with something more basic. we can go out and we can talk to, you know, a couple of people in the right sort of customer demographic, and we can find out what they think. We can test different aspects of this idea without actually having to create it. And then we can move on to the numbers once we're a little bit more sure about it, if that makes sense.
No, I was talking like post interviews and going to market first.
Yeah, so I guess with going to market, look, there's no way to know for sure if it's a totally new thing. The best that you can do is to go off something that has been similar or something that you've done previously as an organization, but it's very dependent on the idea. For some concepts, you know, it really depends what you're looking at and what you're hoping to retain for that product. Sorry if that's not a helpful.
No, it's just a question that I've been thinking, and it's good to know that in the end of the day there is no right or wrong answer, because the risk here is that if you set a number and if you say for this to be successful you need to reach this number, the question is, could you be successful even if you don't reach that number, because the issue is on the number. So this is one of the things that I've been thinking, but thank you for sharing your point of view.
No, absolutely. And, you know, there's different ways of measuring success, especially with innovation. It's not necessarily just about, you know, people buying your product or whatever it is. There's other more intangible benefits and values. And that's often where it's difficult, right? Because sometimes we want to innovate, we want to release a product, not because we think it's going to make us millions and millions of pounds, but because we think it's the right thing to do, it solves a need, it's going to increase your brand perception, it's going to move the company forward. But traditional business structures are such that when people see that on a piece of paper, they're like, where's the numbers? This isn't what I'm used to. I just want to know what's the costs and the revenues and the business model. So it is difficult. Definitely relate to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, we are running short on time. Emily, one final recommendation for all of us.
One final recommendation for all of us. I would suggest set yourself some tasks, pick a mindset, find out how you can apply that practically, and set it as a challenge to yourself. Use it as a way to empower yourself and to channel that point of view to others as well.
Okay, great. So thank you all. Okay, thank you, Emily, for your time in preparing this session. I know the effort to prepare a 20 minutes presentation. We all know. Okay, and we are going to have another session soon with more women in innovation, which is something we need, more women, not just in technology, but also innovation. Our next set of guests will be from the UK. Actually, one is living in New York at the moment, but I will keep you posted. Just follow the Innovation Cafe. It will be in 2 weeks' time, I think. It's going to be exciting. Okay, power women in the world of innovation, something that we need a lot more, and I'm trying to bring them to the cafe. Emily, many thanks. Okay, and I hope to see you all in our next session and sessions. And let's keep pushing forward, trying to design a more innovative world, because the world needs people like us that are brave, courageous, are okay to come up with new and fresh ideas, many of the things that you have said on the chat window, okay? Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. It was a pleasure to host another session. Emily, thank you once again.
Yeah, thanks
Bye-bye.
everyone. Lovely to meet you all. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.